Hi, it's Barry at Regroup Fit, and I'm here with Ingmar from AiRO, and we're going to go through the process of setting up AiRO in your Fit studio, and a little bit of the training and a little bit of the information needed to make it a working part of your workflow.
So first step in all of this is to create a digital twin. And we take a photo of the athlete standing, hands and fists in skin-tight cycling clothes, no helmet or shoes, exactly like this posture. So you want a front photo and you need a side photo of the athlete standing like this. When you take the photo, you can take it with an iPad, you can take it with a smartphone, you can take it with your stationary cameras. The one thing you want to make sure of is that the camera is perfectly vertical on this. So when the camera is too far tilted forward, when the iPad's kind of held like this, then you get a little bit perspective distortion, so on. So that's one part really, is that the camera should be very close to horizontal. Everything else is pretty straightforward. I always get the question, do you need a special backdrop or any of this? The general rule for us is if you can make out the person against a backdrop very easily, the software can as well. If it's like very poorly lit or, let's say, black jersey on a black backdrop or something like this, that could be a little bit harder. But generally, it's very robust to the different backgrounds.
Is there a set distance that you prefer between the rider and the lens?
No set distance from that side. We are working on features that automatically handle all the lens distortion from fisheye lenses. Right now, it's actually better if you're further away, so you don't take a photo with like a massive fisheye lens.
Okay.
In the future, this should matter less and less. But in general, you want to be as square on the photo as possible.
Okay.
The other things that you need is the height of the athlete, the weight, the gender. Here you can upload these photos, and then you choose the bike type to get a CDA offset, the distance and speed for the software to give you recommendations at that you want, and then of course making sure you get the rider consent for uploading the data and submitting all of this. Once you're done, you hit submit. This gets uploaded to our servers in 3.5 minutes. You will have your first result. We like to say, if you do this part of your intake assessment at the beginning, if you do any flexibility assessments, or if you do any rider interview, this typically takes much longer than 3.5 minutes. So by the time you're done with that part, the digital twin will also be generated, and you can go on straight to the next step.
So create this as the beginning of the process so that the computer can work in the background?
Yeah, exactly. And that's typically before you do your main fit. To say also about the general process that we recommend is, yes, collect this as part of your very first step. Mm-hmm. Then do your regular bike fit to make first sure that the person is biomechanically set up correctly, that you have all the cleats set up, that you have all the lower leg kinematics done. And also during that part of the fit, you build up an intuition of what you'd be okay or not to okay with the athlete to try once you get to the AiRO part of it. So we like to capture these photos, also the front view and side view photo from the pre-fit baseline on it. Then you would do your completely regular bike fit the way you would do it with or without the software on it. And then afterwards, you would do the AiRO part on it and saying, okay, now that we feel you are safe, injury-free, you're in a good baseline position, like a post-fit baseline, now we would go into AiRO and we would recommend the things to test there to just help you get faster.
So make sure that the biomechanics are set before you start running the actual simulation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So how do I go from those two images that we took of the athlete to the athlete being on a bicycle? What is that process?
Exactly. So after the digital twin has been created, you can select that digital twin and you can create a simulation. That loads this pose mode here. From there, we upload our reference photos, the photos that were taken on that you took with your athlete on camera. Which are those? Do you know?
Those are them.
Okay, those are them. Perfect. Let me look at the icons. So let's take the side view photo, let that upload, and then the software will automatically run a pose estimation on it and try to get the initial guess closer to all of this.
And the same rules apply for those the on-bike photos apply to the the off the bike photos, we want the camera to be parallel?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And ideally, you have some distance that you have no perspective distortion and no lens distortion on.
Okay.
Okay, now this uploaded, we can also upload a front photo. We do not require a front photo. We often get this question, hey, my studio doesn't have enough space for it. What's the height? What's the distance? This is a big part why we are working on correcting for lens distortion, so that for many studios, it's easier to fit that into tight spaces. But you can use the front photo to overlay the pose, or you can use, especially for the front, like pad width measurements.
Right.
And stack measurements to do it. So now that the software has made an initial guess, our next step is to align this reference photo.
And I see on the screen you have imaginary wheels and tires and a crank there in the middle. Is that where you start, or do you start with the athlete?
Yeah, so generally I start with trying to overlay the glutes, then the lower back, upper back, make their way through the body. But I do double check whether the crank ends up in the right location as well. And then we can adjust down here through our pose sliders, the saddle setback and the knee angle if this is not perfectly aligned. So here we can see, okay. Let's get the crank to overlay. The wheels do not account for differences in wheelbase or that side of things. So it's a general help to help with scaling initially, but it is not critical to get
So that crank position is more important.
The crank is the one.
Okay, excellent.
Exactly. Okay, the way I do it typically is that I have one pass through kind of as a course first fit here, and then I go a second time through and say, okay, does this look pretty accurate on it?
So the first thing you're looking at is the glutes and the hips, and then moving to the elbow.
Glutes, yeah. Then normally making my way into the lower back. So you can adjust the lower back curvature here to match better the upper back curvature until we feel, okay, this outline fits pretty well. Then in this case, I would go into the shoulders. Here, this is both the shrug and the scapular retraction to say, okay, around here, now that arm layout looks good. In this case, I would go just the elbow bend a little bit, just so I can see. Generally, when the arms look a little bit too long, that's an indication that the scapular retraction isn't quite correct. Okay. Like if we think of this position here, as I sink in with the shoulder blades, from the side view, it makes my arms look longer or shorter, right? So it's a good way to double check.
So you're starting at the base of the spine and working your way up towards the head and shoulders.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when that part is roughly good, you'll see what's missing. So for example, often what we see, this actually already getting quite close. We can now see, okay, this is already actually on the first try quite a good fit. Now I would start over again and make my way through the body again and say, okay, in this case, what do we need to do? Here I'm already actually pretty happy with the whole back, with the arms. Here we can see it's not quite perfect yet. So we would...
Is that a scale issue? Or is that more of, we just need to continue to tweak things?
Yeah, so normally you see two things simultaneously. If the arms are off and the head is off at the same time, then that points towards it's a scale issue. If it is one of the two, then it's often a fit issue.
Okay. How often do we need to use the alignment tools to get this job done? Or is it mostly through the adjustments through the body?
So you need an initial alignment to make sure the crank and the glutes are in the right place. After this, sometimes the software gets it quite good on the first try. Sometimes it takes like a second round through from it. Once you're done, the other important thing before you send it off to a baseline simulation is you put a helmet onto the athlete. We ride outside with helmets.
Right.
We test in wind tunnels with helmets. The airflow is quite affected by which helmets the athlete is wearing. And you can select from our list of, I think, 18 different helmets that we have now in here, all the most popular TT helmets and some of the Aero road helmets. And then you can also adjust how that helmet sits on the athlete. Once you've gotten a good overlay, you send this off to the server. The convention is to name the first run baseline. Now this is simulating. This is taking around 7 minutes, but we're able now, once this is completely uploaded, this button here becomes available and we can create a variation. And this process is quite fast. We can now load in exactly this pose that the athlete was in. And now we can say, okay, let's work on the posture. Let's work on the fit. Let's do things like cockpit up and down, pads in and out. This case, I would coach the athlete through head position is one thing that stood out to me.
Right.
From this side, coaching to shrug the shoulder blades together, the things that we talk through in our training as well. And say, okay, what are the things to test? And this process is extremely fast, right? It's if we want to say, okay, we can adjust the slider here. It's also a very nice tool to explain to the athletes what you want to see, right? It's this either on the screen or on an iPad. You can really say, okay, here's what your head position currently looks like in the overlay with the photo. And here's what we want you to work on is put the head more in front of the body and test that piece. And then you can hit a simulation button again. You can name this same position dropped head.
So this is why you want to work with bike fitters, and not just an aerodynamicist, you need to know whether or not that head position is sustainable over the course of a half marathon.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. And you have to make sure whether the person can see up the road that way, right? Those are all these important pieces around it. You know the athlete, you have the athlete's injury history. You can then say, okay, what can this person realistically do or not do, right? That's a key piece in all of this around it. But creating this variation took us a few seconds. We can now create the next variation.
From a procedural thing, if I make 5 changes between the baseline position and our analysis, how do I know which one worked?
Yes. So after you're done, you can go to the results screen and you can review the results from your athletes.
Okay.
Right. And there you can go into either under My Aero Twins, you can select the Aero Twin that you used. You can scroll to the bottom, and here will be a list of all the simulations that you've done. You can compare against all these variations, which gets you to this compare screen here, where you can see the differences in CDA, in power cost, or in time cost for that given athlete. And you can get all the overlaying positions to see, okay, here are the positions we tried. You can talk your athlete through all of this. You can visualize the airflow. It can be quite a good engaging experience for your athlete as well to see, okay, here's the work that has been done. And then you can explain, okay, it looks like, for example, stack height changes. Lower wasn't any faster, higher was a little bit better. We worked on your head position. You can narrate it through for your athlete and can then explain why you're thinking this is the thing that we're now going to try on the fit bike. Of course, for a fitter, especially on a modern TT bike, making the changes on the bike itself is the hardest part and the most time-consuming part. And so we're saying if you run all the positions up front, you review them with your athletes, you can then say, okay, and here's what we're going to try in the real world. While before, if you went to wind tunnels, $3,500, like tens of dollars per minute, you really only wanted to test the things that you were almost certain you want to try in the real world. Here, we are like 98, 99% cheaper. Your main cost is actually your studio cost and your own personal cost. So it's much better to just test broadly virtually first and weed everything out from the aerodynamics perspective, what you want to try and what you don't want to try. So now all the simulations are done. You can navigate to the aero twin of the athlete you were testing. At the bottom, you find the list of all the positions that were tested. You can press this compare simulation button that opens the compare screen. And you can see for the different positions, the time cost, power cost, or the absolute CDA of the different positions that you tested. You get a table of all the different details of everything that you wanted to look at. And then one of the things that keeps happening to me is I ran 10 positions. I maybe have not named some of them quite perfectly. I don't fully remember all the changes I made to, let's say, the 4th out of the 10 positions.
Right.
We have this overlay view where you can see all the individual ones overlaid. You can turn them on and off independently. You can check how it changed the things that you tested, essentially for you to remember and to walk through with the athlete of the changes that were done. You can also, from here, if you click any of those in the run data, you can get to the detail view of each of these positions. And then, of course, you're also able to visualize the airflow and the posture of the athlete. It's a great way for the fitter to show one, you actually ran CFD on this, you actually visualize the airflow on this. It helps great for athlete buy-in. And we can adjust the airflow and streaming on it to explore the posture and see what you can potentially do to find some additional gains. After you review those gains, you can go back to the compare view and you can decide which position is your final position. Then you can go and create a report for the athlete. The way you do this here is you can write your analysis, and then we always compare the baseline position to the final position and say, okay, what is the one that you're actually recommending for the athlete? This then creates a report, which is a customized website that you can then share with your athlete.
Excellent. The from a training perspective, we broke a couple of our rules and we started with a non-optimized position. And I think what the most interesting thing about our results is that none of our changes made her faster.
Yes.
But what we did was we saved her time and money trying things that are popular right now, right? Higher hands is popular right now, but in her case, it did not make her faster, and we just saved her some money from buying that new part for the front of her bike.
Yes. Also, the helmets we tested were actually not faster than the helmet the athlete came in on.
Yeah.
And in that case, we can save the athlete some money and say, hey, the helmet that you're already coming in.
And at $500, that $200 investment in an AiRO evaluation just saved them $500.
Yes.
How I have been using the software, a lot of it has been sort of a blue sky process. I'm very fortunate and I get to work with a lot of world-class athletes, and we're thinking about things that are going to happen in 18 months, things that are going to happen in 24 months. We have an Olympics coming up. We have World Championships coming up. And we know from the math that a given athlete needs to produce X amount of power with X amount of CDA. What I've been doing this with is, how do we get there? How do we get to that CDA? My favorite thing about this is I can find that position using your software, even if the athlete can't actually hold the position yet. And then if we get the aerodynamicist and the bike fitter and the equipment manufacturer and the athlete and the trainer all in the same room and say, we have this goal 18 months from now, this is where we need to be. If we start at that end and work our way backwards, to me, AiRO is like the perfect first step. We can dramatically decrease the amount of time and energy and expense it would take to find that goal virtually rather than going to a wind tunnel and throwing darts at the wall in the dark.
Yes, absolutely. I also like to compare it to swimming, especially for triathletes. They're familiar with this. Triathletes in the pool work on their swim pose every time, and they're not expecting that somebody comes that tells them one time what perfect swim technique looks like, and the next day they're swimming perfectly. This is something that if you're a serious athlete, if you're a pro athlete, you're working on it for years. And what I think this software really enables is this opportunity to see, okay, here is what your journey could look like in a year from now, if you're willing to put in the work. And we're talking tens of watts, typically in race distance, if you're willing to put in the work. It's substantial work, but I actually believe it's often less work than to getting 10, 15 watts FTP up is substantially more. It's not free speed as it used to be called, but it is easier speed sometimes than getting it just through the purely muscular training adaptations. So I think you're making a great point there.
I find it's super useful with amateurs as well. I just had an amateur mountain biker who's doing Leadville, and we know what's fast on a mountain bike, right? We know how much having that narrower hand position, even if you're just choking it in. So we used AiRO to calculate what that was. It can affect his feeding strategy, his fueling, all of that information. But what we found out is that narrower hand position in the real world loaded his shoulders. So we had to start at the end though and work our way backwards to find out we needed a 1 centimeter longer stem to make the narrower hand position work. If I had just told him on race day, go out there and spend as much time as you can with your hands next to the stem, he would have had a very miserable race. So the fact that 12 months before the event, we were able to do that simulation, gave him 12 months to prepare. And I just love that aspect of your software, how we can start at the end and work backwards to where the athlete is now, and then have a step-by-step process to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And the other part here is you don't even need to have the athlete present after you collected these baseline photos. You can test things in the upcoming weeks or months if you have ideas. Every fitter, if you buy a pro license, gets 1,000 simulations per year, which is substantially more than even when I had my own wind tunnel and I had the keys to a full-time tunnel. I rarely tested 1,000 different positions in a full year. And so the ability as a fitter to test positions, to use this to educate yourself, to try new things. We know fitters are competitive with each other. You have high-end athletes. If you want to have an edge over your competition, you can use the software to try things that other people haven't tried. And you can experiment without taking the risk of leading an athlete down the wrong track. Because you can do this without the athlete present at your own time. You can try your own things. And then you can start experimenting. And I think actually this learning piece and figuring out how do we get the CDA even lower next year and the year after, I think those are another part there if we think long term.
Excellent.
That's a major opportunity.
And accomplishing that within an hour in a fit studio is a pretty substantial gain.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time in the studio today, Ingmar. The Regroup family is super happy that you're here. And we're super happy about being able to integrate AiRO into our fit process.
Thank you for having me. It's been great working with you. And I can't wait to see what you're doing more with the software, how you're using it. I'm learning a lot from you. And so I appreciate our partnership.
Excellent. Thank you.